Welcome to Criterion's special edition of The Silence of the Lambs. On this track, you will hear commentary by director Jonathan Demme, actors Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins, screenwriter Ted Tally, and John Douglas of the FBI. Jodie Foster.
When I did come in to meet Jonathan Demme about the movie, I knew that I was his second choice. And he said, okay, well, tell me what it is that you love about this and why it's so important to you. And I kind of went on this very long and probably totally annoying diatribe about how it fit into my personal agenda in some ways, my career, the kinds of movies that I've done, and where it fit in my kind of psyche in some ways. And I also talked about sort of the mythology of a female hero like this one, like a Clarice Starling, the structure of which has never been known for women before. The folktales, there's always a prince, a young man. There's a pest, a kind of plague in his village. And he's the one who is sent out to take care of the citizens and find the panacea for whatever this illness is. He goes through forests and leaves his country and meets gnomes and demons and, smotes them down or whatever the hell they do, and ultimately realizes that his great impediment and his great handicap is that there's something that's been right in front of his face that is who he is, which is keeping him from finding the dragon and finding the panacea. And once he welcomes and embraces this very ugly, shameful, small, and petty side of himself, then he can find the panacea and come back to his people. And as he crosses the mountains and crosses in and he realizes that he's going to save his citizenship, he realizes that he'll never be a citizen again because he doesn't belong there anymore. The original credit sequence was she bursts into a room of terrorists and terrible things are happening, a woman's abducted, and then everybody goes, just kidding, it's just an exercise for the FBI. And I said, what you need is something that has to do with the training sequence.
Director Jonathan Demme.
Jodie, can you actually climb up that? Jodie's always in great shape. Wonder if she might have done a little extra conditioning. On take 20, she's like going up there just as forcefully as she was on take 1.
Darling.
Here comes one of our real FBI actors. It's Larry's job to help people here on the Yellow Brick Road learn how to do it and hang in there properly. That little funny sign there is not set dressing. That's what the FBI has tacked to the tree there.
I thought it was very important to go to Quantico and really see what that was like and who these young people were. Basically, what I did was sort of learn how to shoot and learn about fingerprinting and autopsies, and I certainly took John Douglas's class about serial killers and their motives and their patterns. They're people who really, in the heart of them, want this world to be better and want it to be safer. And they feel like they want to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And that's really honorable, because I feel that way about my work, too. I actually have a service personality. And, I'm one of those people who, always made my bed when I was in school. And I always got straight A's, and I always show up on time. And if I'm not on time, I break out in hives. And I have to be on time to work, and so I kind of have a service mentality too, and so does Clarice.
FBI agent John Douglas.
Probably a third of my unit of about 40 are women. Of profilers, we have one out of a dozen agents. I have one woman profiler.
Join me a little bit later, about 3 hours from now.
Jonathan Demme.
I find myself much more interested in satisfying large numbers of other people than in amusing myself. What has great potential for this film is Tom Harris's book, Tom Harris's story, his characters, and we don't need some director coming in here and making it his own. We need slavish loyalty to the text. And as a great, great fan of the book, as I was, it was easy for me to translate my ardor for the book into my work.
John Douglas.
Serial killers, someone who will kill, and there's a cooling off period in between each of the kills. And the cooling off period can last hours, it can last days, and for that matter, it can last years. And the reason for this is they're able to go for such long periods of time is that they picked up trophies and souvenirs belonging to the victim. That may include body parts, that may include clothing, it may include jewelry. So in between each of the kills, what they will do in their fantasy, in their world of fantasy, is that they'll pull out these articles and relive the previous homicides.
Your instructors tell me you're doing well. Top quarter of your class.
I hope so. They haven't posted any grades yet.
A job's come up, and I thought about you. Not a job, really, more of an interesting errand.
When we profile a case, we spread the victim's photographs on the wall, which she's about to see. We show the autopsy photographs. Her background is from the University of Virginia. She should be used to seeing some of this stuff, but again, she's coming from the academic environment, and she's really going to get down with the dirt now, and so it's quite a shock to her.
When you graduate, you want to come to work for me in behavioral science.
Yes, very much, sir. Very much.
I don't think Scott himself is anything like John Douglas. John Douglas is very athletic, very handsome, very tall, lean guy. He used to be an ace SWAT guy, sniper squad. So he is an incredible shot. That's basically his background in Detroit, which is a pretty heavy place to come from. And yet he has dimples, and he's just like light and funny and gentle, and you can't believe that this is what he does for a living.
I don't expect him to talk to you. But I have to be able to say we tried.
I think Clarice Starling is probably my favorite character that I've ever played, if I was to know her. She's somebody that I really admire and have a lot of respect for. She's probably the least flashy character I've ever played. She's somebody who speaks very carefully, who's very moral and very grounded, who, as I say, has kind of a service personality. And that control masks this very delicate, probing, microscopic eye. She sees every detail in the room. She sees the wedding ring on the guy's finger. She sees everything. She speaks in this kind of clipped and sort of hushed way, revealing a slight accent from her origins. But she feels like she's risen above that. I think she's very afraid of being the victim of anything.
Dr. Chilton at the asylum will go over all the physical procedures used with him. Do not deviate from them for any reason whatsoever. And you're to tell him nothing personal, Starling. Believe me, you don't want Hannibal Lecter inside your head.
The thing that's interesting about Crawford is that he says to Clarice, you don't want him in your head, but he sets her up completely to do exactly that, and he knows very well that that's what's going to happen. And it's what he dares not do with Lecter. So he sends the young female rookie in to basically be used by him, because it's a place that he doesn't dare to go.
A lot of detectives here, but I must say I can't ever remember one as attractive.
I think there's something very important about having a woman hero who's a true woman hero in the most archetypal sense of the word, and yet doesn't have to clothe herself in men's clothing. She's not 6'2". She doesn't kill the dragon by being mightier. She actually does it because of her instinct, because of her brain, and because somehow she's seen something, a detail that other people have missed. And that's a real side of female heroism that should be applauded and should be respected.
Very clever, isn't he, using you?
What do you mean, sir?
Pretty young woman to turn him on.
Agent Starling would never walk in to Lecter's cell wearing what she was wearing, because it makes her look like a lawyer. And she shouldn't look like a lawyer, because otherwise he'll think that she thinks she's smarter than he is.
Jonathan Demme.
In the book, Clarice's descent down into the depths to meet Dr. Lecter is presented as an absolutely terrifying journey, almost surreally so. It's important that by the time Clarice gets to Dr. Lecter, you don't think there's a room that can contain him, that he's got almost a supernatural power to reach out and get somebody, that nobody is kept farther away from us anywhere as Dr. Lecter is.
He did this to her.
This moment where there's a pause and he shows her the photograph of the the nurse that Dr. Lecter had ravaged. Tak Fujimoto is a sucker for red lighting effects at moments of imminent violence. When he wants to make people a little bit uncomfortable, he starts sticking red filters in his lights.
Well, maybe we'll have more luck if I go in by myself. What do you think?
There's a lot of submarine noises in this sequence, especially when Clarice enters the antechamber to where the cells actually are. It's just like being in the sonar room of a nuclear submarine. Noises that can only be heard way beneath the Earth's surface. Skip Livesey, our sound designer, really kind of had a field day coming up with as many noises as he possibly could for that sequence, and I love it. We worked on the sound for that scene and the mix for days trying to get it right.
Hi, I'm Barney.
I'm Barney. Clarice, darling.
Mm-hmm. Nice to meet you, Clarice. You can hang your coat up here if you like.
Actually, I will.
He's past the others. The last cell, you keep to the right.
Anthony Hopkins.
Jonathan Demme asked me this. How would I see the first scene? He was is a remarkable director and a very nice man to work with, and is very open and flexible and has no ego problem about ideas that you may suggest. Jonathan said, but how would you like to be seen? How would you like to be lying on the bed or sitting on a chair, writing or drawing or reading? I said, no, I'd like to be seen standing upright at attention in the middle of the cell. And he took that in for a moment. He said, okay, well, let's have a look at it. And they did a camera rehearsal on camera. And he had a video monitor there, which you could see. And his reaction was one of, yeah. It's my haircut. First time we see him, the audience will see him, or Jodie Foster will see him, her first point of view is of him looking straight back at her. Now that is terrifying in my consciousness. So I wanted them to see very nice, charming, erudite, smiling man saying good morning, which will be terrifying.
May I see your credentials?
Certainly.
Closer, please. Closer.
When I came up with the sound of his voice, I didn't try to localize it or become so accurate with it, because once you start doing that, it becomes about the voice and about the acting and about the accent. Once you get involved in those details, you're out on the wrong limb of the tree. You have to concentrate on the main central spine of the part.
I'm still in training at the academy.
Jack Crawford sent a trainee to me.
Yes, I'm a student. I'm here to learn from you. Maybe you can decide for yourself whether or not I'm qualified enough to do that.
I think there's something locked in generally in the collective subconscious of the human race. An excitement, a fascination with the dark side of ourselves, the shadowy interior of ourselves. The whole of human history has been a mystery. I mean, our propensity for violence, our propensity for destruction, and our potential for good is also a peculiar puzzle. Nobody's ever been able to figure out what makes us tick.
I myself cannot.
When you've got that glass between you, there's something peculiarly powerful and attractive about power, that erotically attractive about power. And I think that's what Hannibal Lecter has. He has power.
But not today.
Did you do all these drawings, Doctor?
That is the Duomo scene from the Belvedere. You know, Florence?
All that detail just from memory, sir?
Memory, Agent Starling, is what I have instead of a view.
Well, perhaps...
The scene that grabbed me was that very first scene when the sheer power of the man, when he said, you know what you look like to me with your good bag and your cheap shoes. You look like a rube, a well-scrubbed hustling rube with a little taste. And that's the scene that really grabbed me, and that's the one I latched the whole performance on.
Now this ham-handed segue into your questionnaire, it won't do.
I'm only asking you to look at this, Doctor. Either you will or you won't.
Yeah. Jack Crawford must be very busy indeed if he is recruiting help from the student body. Busy hunting that new one, Buffalo Bill. What a naughty boy he is.
Early on in the casting process, I felt convinced that Anthony Hopkins would be the best Dr. Lecter imaginable, especially coming off of his performance as the kindly doctor in Elephant Man. Dr. Lecter, in addition to having to obviously radiate tremendous brilliance, and Hopkins certainly does that. You take one look at his face and you're convinced this is a person of superior intelligence. Also, I thought Dr. Lecter should radiate tremendous humanity.
Sort of trophies from their victims.
I didn't.
No. No, you ate yours.
You send that through now.
And it was a great moment in the read-through where Hopkins gave the first big speech to Clarice. When Tony finished that speech, in this moment of silence that followed it, Kenny Utt, our brilliant producer, went, "Yeah." He told me recently when Kenny Utt died that that was one of the greatest moments off camera that he had experienced as an actor, because he had arrived in New York thinking, what are they doing, having some English guy playing this part? I'll never be able to do it right. Maybe my ideas for Lecter aren't that great.
Do you know what you look like to me with your good bag and your cheap shoes? You look like a rube. A well-scrubbed, hustling rube with a little taste. Good nutrition's given you some length of bone, but you're not more than one generation from poor white trash, are you, Agent Starling?
The best moment for me in this film was when Jodie Foster does that reaction after that speech when I say, you know what you look like to me with your good bag and your cheap shoes, right up all the way to the FBI. Is her look.
All those tedious, sticky fumblings in the backseats of cars while you could only dream of getting
that destroyed look when you see about 5 different thoughts going through her face as she tries to sort of maintain her dignity, and yet she's on the point of tears because he's so destroyed. I think that's a great piece of acting in Jodie's performance there.
What about it? Why don't you look at yourself and write down what you see?
I am as in the dark today as I was when I first saw Anthony Hopkins unexpectedly make this amazing kind of slurping, kissing, whatever sound that is he makes when he describes his meal there.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
I remember seeing Dracula when I was a kid. And I don't know if it did actually happen in the film, but it was a Bela Lugosi Dracula, and when he sees Jonathan Harker, I don't know if I dreamed this up. I didn't know where it came from. When Jonathan Harker cuts himself with a razor, and Dracula goes. But I don't know if that actually did occur in the Bela Lugosi film. It must have occurred in my subconscious somewhere.
I bit my wrist so I could die. Look at the blood! Gotcha!
When Miggs is masturbating and throws his sperm on Clarice, that was definitely one of the most distasteful shots I've ever been involved with.
I would not have had that happen to you. Discourtesy is unspeakably ugly to me.
Then do this test for me.
No, but I will make you happy. I'll give you a chance for what you love most.
What is that, Doc?
Advancement.
It was absolutely intense right off the bat. At the end of the day, having that kind of concentration, because don't forget, half of this stuff is done in POV, so you're looking directly at the camera and imagining that it's the other person. All of the gestures are so minute. We shot in a very specific kind of stock with very low stops. I guess it's low stops. So that even if you had an inch forward of your mark, have your head an inch forward, you'd go out of focus. So you couldn't make any sudden movements without it being completely rehearsed, and you had to stay in a really detailed way. So it's like doing any kind of really minute Zen task. By concentrating, you get completely immersed in it. And by the end of the day, I was exhausted, but it's the most fun I've had in the whole movie. The Clarice flashbacks are really wonderful because they are exactly what you think of. You don't think of long dialogue scenes. You think of The time when your dad came home and he spun you around and you could feel his keys hit your jeans, and some of it is minor and doesn't mean anything, but when you look at it in retrospect, it's everything that the film is about, which is about seeking this kind of love and safety that she's never known again from her father and knowing that she'll never have it again.
I mean, so much of Clarice's mental state is dictated by experiences from the past that the pictures seem to invite flashbacks so that her past would be a certain part of the movie.
John Douglas.
With Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs, she too came down into the unit and spent time with myself in my office. I went through a host of crime scene photographs, talked to her about the criminal personality, where these guys come from, how they test you, how they're always trying to outwit you. I mean, Lecter is looking at her as a tool, looking at something that he can exploit, he can take advantage, he can gain something from her, and she's not going to outwit him. What was unusual in that movie was having the female there, going into the penitentiary alone as a female FBI agent. And some of the things that she did as an FBI agent, whether female or male, we would never have done. The scenes where she goes to that garage at nighttime and she's crawling underneath that garage door that is stuck, and that is something you don't do.
Dad. How?
The orderly heard Lecter whispering to him all afternoon and Miggs crying. They found him at bed check. He'd swallowed his own tongue.
The first day of filming, which was the scene where she receives the phone call, that was the first thing with dialogue we did. We had already shot the running through the woods scene, which was wonderful. And as soon as Jodie opened her mouth and started speaking, I loved dramatically what she was doing, but there was no trace of an accent. It made me nervous because it sounded like Jodie Foster. And that sort of had probably been what frightened me the most about casting Jodie in the first place, was that I felt that at the end of the day, all of her characters were Jodie Foster. So I said, you sound like a Californian or something, aren't you going to do some accent? She says, well, I'm doing an extremely subtle accent. I guess you need a little bit more. And I said, yes, because I didn't detect anything. And on take two, suddenly the way we hear Clarice talk just came spewing out of her mouth, and it was like, there's Clarice. It was unbelievably exciting.
So nobody's been in here since 1980?
Not to my knowledge. Privacy is a great concern to my customers.
Yes, I won't disturb anything, I promise. I'll be out of here before you know it.
I hope you.
Yes, actually. Yeah.
There is nothing unhuman about violence and cruelty. It exists everywhere in everything that we do. For her, the challenge of the film, and the reason why Lecter allows her to take the steps towards understanding, is that he wants to be accepted as human. He doesn't ask to be pardoned or forgiven. He just wants to be accepted as a human being.
Jonathan Demme.
In a movie that contains numerous encounters of authentic terror and even violence, this is a sequence which needed to deliver a certain kind of tense impact without anything really happening. After all, it's just a young woman barging into a garage in search of something she knows not what. And it was important to try to create a tension that on the one hand would be very effective, and on the other hand wouldn't feel like a big kind of tease afterwards.
Oh, if this door should fall down or anything else, this is the number for our Baltimore field office. Now, they know that you're with me. You call them if anything should happen.
Yes, Miss Stein.
Clarice gets pricked by a nail going in, and that's meant to create tremendous anxiety. It's meant to feel like a harbinger of frightening things that will happen inside. Christy Zier went nuts in a wonderful way, I think, in creating an environment in here that would be frightening as well. There's naked dummies in there, which are obviously meant to put us in mind of corpses and people who have been abused. The American flag, which was Christie's idea. She said, I don't know why, but I just think it'd be great to drape the car in a big old American flag. What I took from that was that this country has a terrible motherlode of violence at its heart, along with other loftier things. And that maybe this was a way of not that that would be useful necessarily to the audience, or not that they're meant to do it, but I enjoyed making a correlation between the American flag, America, and a search for the heart of violence. When Clarice discovers this severed head in a jar, which is the head of Benjamin Raspail, that's one of our producers, Ed Saxon's head, which he sat and had all these face masks molded off of him. Ed does a cameo in all the movies, and this is, in a way, his most personal. I love the character of Barney, and I love Frankie Faison, the actor who plays him. There were more Barney scenes, which, for matters of pacing, got cut out. But I loved Barney's relationship with Dr. Lecter, that he had a kind of respect for Dr. Lecter, and that Dr. Lecter, which we still have in there, has an appreciation of Barney.
That garage?
Each confrontation with Lecter is different. It's deeper. The first part is him telling her and putting her in her place and saying, you'll never be as important as I are. You're a common woman who will never rise above your body. And the second connection is her coming to him and asking him for something, and him saying, well, in return, then you have to accept me as a human being.
This is my second day on the film, in the darkened cell.
Thank you.
Your bleeding has stopped.
The preacher that's on the TV when Clarice returns to visit Dr. Lecter is my dear friend and gifted performance artist from Tallahassee, Florida, Jim Roach, who I met on location in Tallahassee while making Something Wild. He's the voiceless preacher. Jim wrote a whole rant for this character, which was about child abuse, which is what lurks at the core of James Gumb's torment, in which, sadly, the movie Silence of the Lambs is not pervaded by the super awareness of how it's child abuse that gives rise to the James Gums and the even Dr. Lecters of the world. It's stated here and there, but not nearly enough. And that's sort of my one disappointment with the movie, is that I failed to accentuate child abuse enough. But Jim Roach is there doing a rant about child abuse, which we don't get to hear, of course. It kind of sums up my failure right there. It's there, but it ain't coming through.
This, I suppose, is where the relationship starts, almost romance, really, of this dark, tortured character, this strange, remote creature, this terrifying monster just sitting there in the darkness. I have to say, I relished playing all these scenes. I mean, I enjoyed playing them.
Exhilarated?
Jack Crawford is helping your career, isn't he? Apparently he likes you, and you like him too.
I never thought about it.
Do you think Jack Crawford wants you sexually? True, he is much older, but do you think he visualizes scenarios, exchanges, fucking you?
I was invited out for dinner with Jonathan Demme, Ted Talley, and we went to Des Artistes restaurant in New York, October the 15th, I remember, 1989. And Ted Talley, the screenplay writer, said to me, he said, how are you going to play it? Do you have any idea? I said, well, I don't know. I keep thinking of HAL, the computer, in 2001, Stanley Kubrick's film. And that's how I saw Lecter, a machine, a brilliant, complex piece of machinery, a killing machine, a killing instrument. So attuned to everything, a man who is locked in the monstrosity of his own mind, locked in the cell of a monstrous mind, a brilliant genius mind, nevertheless perverted and sick and evil. I think what he can't stand is messiness. Gum, the Buffalo Bill character, disgusts him because it's messy. Lecter's a clinical killer.
What I want is a view. I want a window where I can see a tree, or even water. I want to be in a federal institution far away from Dr. Chilton.
What did you mean by fledgling killer?
This was a scene I'd always looked forward to, was when he turns around and says, "I'll help you catch him, Clarice," was the image I'd had in my mind, which is the trigger image, I think, of the man at the end of the darkened corridor of our dreams, of our subconscious mind, the guardian angel, who turns out to be, in fact, not as terrifying if you play the game with him. I suppose if you go back through psychology, like Jung says, if you make friends with the shadow in yourself, if you come to accept the limitations and the darker side of your nature, it's not as terrifying. In fact, if you make friends with the dark side of yourself, life will become richer.
FBI agent John Douglas.
The driving force of a serial killer is to manipulate, dominate, and control a victim, because in their mind, in their lifetime, they have been manipulated, dominated, and controlled. And now, for the first time in their life, they are in control. They are the executioner. They can push the button. They can pull the switch and decide whether or not this person will live or die. It was the torturing. It was the hunt. It was being that predatory animal, looking for the victim and being prepared with a murder kit in their vehicle. And today, the vehicle of choice is the van. So when they grab the victim and tie him to eye bolts in the van, and they insulate the interior of the van, they can keep these victims for hours, and all the screams from inside the van will not be heard. Buffalo Bill is a composite of 3 killers. Ted Bundy, like Buffalo Bill, had a cast on his arm. Ted Bundy used to wait outside libraries with a bunch of books under his arm. As soon as the right victim came along, he would drop these books. The Good Samaritan female would come over. He was a good-looking guy, would help pick up the books, and then he would get them to help bring the books over to his VW, his Volkswagen Bug. So then he'd get her to crank up the engine. And once he got her in the car, she was in his web. And then he would smack her in the head with a cast, force her down onto the passenger side of the car, cuff her, and drive her off. The other aspect is Gary Heidnik in Philadelphia. Gary Heidnik would go on the hunt, pick up women, and what he did is he had a pit, like in The Silence of the Lambs, in his cellar. The only difference with Gary Heidnik is he filled the pit up with water, and he put 3 women in there at once. And then he got an electric wire, and he touched the handcuffs to one of the victims and electrocuted her while standing in the water. He removed one of the victims, put her in a freezer. After her body was frozen, took her out of the freezer, ground her body up with dog food, and fed it to the rest of the victims. The third part is Ed Gein in Plainfield, Wisconsin, a population of 300 people. After his mother died, he tried to replace his mother by digging up the graves of elderly women and also killing 2 other elderly women. And what he did with these women after he killed them would take them back to his pig farm, peel off their faces, would preserve the skin and making it supple by putting oil on the skin, and then he would wear these faces and stand in front of mirrors and bounce his image in the reflection, and also put on bodysuits with the breast of these victims. And then also he was into transvesticism. He would put on wigs and jewelry. And so that is the composite. Buffalo Bill alone, there's no such animal. Buffalo Bill is 3 killers rolled into one.
My attitude towards the FBI both changed tremendously and didn't change at all. I have tended to feel for a long time that the FBI has the ability to destroy lives and to undermine great work, as it did with Dr. Martin Luther King and various other people. However, when it came time to research this movie, I'm going to go down and meet the guys that work in the behavioral sciences unit and to discover what exceptional people they are and how they're really at the cutting edge of the whole effort to not only apprehend serial killers, but even to dig deeper into societal reasons and personal reasons that give rise to serial killers. You realize that these are very, very heroic, tremendously important people, because despair and abuse is so prevalent in our society that is giving rise to human beings who wind up behaving in the kind of ways that our fictional character James Gumb and the real people who are called serial killers behave.
Then he shoots them, skins them, and dumps them, each body in a different river. The water leaves us no trace evidence of any kind.
This is a beautiful scene because as she's looking at the autopsy reports, Scott Glenn's character Crawford has to scream the details because they're stuck in a little tiny airplane. And it's really a strange thing to hear horrible, sadistic details screamed at the top of your lungs.
Circles where the girls were abducted, arrows where their bodies were found. This new one today washed up here, Elk River, West Virginia.
John Douglas.
We have to be different than the psychologists and psychiatrists. We must first study the crime scene photographs, the autopsy protocol. We must study the victims of these crimes, so that when we conduct these interviews, what usually happens is that the subjects will test you to see whether or not you really studied their case. They will admit to certain things about the crimes, but other information they'll hold back.
Within their own ethnic groups. He's not a drifter. He's got his own house somewhere, not an apartment.
Why?
What he does with them takes privacy.
I didn't feel like I needed to view or listen to any of some of the stuff they have down in behavioral sciences. I'm appalled enough at the phenomena that I didn't feel like I needed any extra ingredients.
My mission was to educate the best way I could Jodie Foster, Scott Glenn, Ted Levine, who's Buffalo Bill, but particularly Scott Glenn, because he was going to portray me. Initially, he was very liberal. He was against the death penalty. He just drove me up the wall. And then I let him listen to a tape of two killers in Los Angeles, Bittaker and Norris, whose goal was to pick up a teenager for every year, starting at 13, and torture them for hours and make audio tapes of the kill and play back the audio tapes of their screaming and their yelling and their begging to be killed, to take them out of their misery. So I turned this tape on, and he listened to 1 minute of this tape, and he had tears in his eyes. The big stumbling block in this country, and it was seen in Silence of the Lambs, is that we have a lot of police departments, those good old boy syndromes, through no fault of their own many times. They don't have the resources, they don't have the training, they don't have the experience. Plus, there's a problem in this country where police aren't willing to share information.
Appreciate being invited to your jurisdiction. I didn't call you. That was somebody from the state attorney's office. We'll extend you every courtesy, but right now, Sheriff, this type of sex crime has certain aspects I just as soon discuss in private. You know what I mean?
It's a very graphic metaphor for what Clarice, and indeed on some level all women, are up against as they try to accomplish things in our country. So I enjoy all these jerky guys staring at Clarice and how she kind of handles it so well.
I think you'll notice that all the flashbacks that Clarice has with the younger Clarice are moving towards the camera in a straight line towards another place. Each time you follow somebody like this with the kind of stock we were using and the kind of low light levels that they were using, there's an eerie quality of going in and out of focus a tiny bit that I think your eye can't even quite see, but that's really disconcerting in tension making.
I love the funeral home scene. I love the imagery of, in fact, her mind is going to the coffin. I love the little girl that plays the young Clarice, who really doesn't look anything like Jodie Foster. She does have just a very special look, and I thought it was much more important to try to capture a kind of a Jodie Foster Clarice feeling from the little girl than to find some look-alike.
Fetch Dr. Akins from the chapel.
Yes, sir. Starling, we're back here.
Tell Lamar to come on when he's finished playing his music.
Yeah, we'll be sending him in a minute.
This is another scene that I'm really extremely fond of.
A six-way link-up. Chicago, Detroit.
This is always an interesting point about Clarice, which I like a lot, is in a room full of big, strapping West Virginia lawmen who are standing around drinking coffee and eating donuts over a corpse. She puts on her heaviest West Virginia accent, for the only time in the movie, to tell it's sort of morally not a good thing to be around the body, and that this girl would have wished that maybe they could have stepped out. And of course, Crawford is eternally proud of her being manipulative.
Once again, there's Jodie surrounded by a bunch of guys who, look at her like, how dare you even speak, much less tell us what to do.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's right. West Virginia. Elk River. Stand by for transmission.
Some of my favorite actors are in this scene. Our great producer, Kenny Yutt, plays Dr. Aiken, the country doctor with a bow tie, and Tracy Walter, who, Bob from Batman and zillions of other great things, plays the house attendant for the mortuary. Those are two faces that could stop trucks right there.
This is, I think, the moment where Clarice really changes in the movie. She starts out as one woman, and after this scene, she's somebody totally different.
Bill. Star-shaped contact entrance wound over the sternum. Muzzle stamp at the top.
Wrongful death.
Wrongful death.
This is where the hero accepts the tasks.
Well, I better get back to that service. Lamar will help you. Lord Almighty.
She makes the decision to pour ahead and to see the most gruesome details of what's happened to her. And what she does see is things that other people don't see. She sees that her nails are painted in such a way that means that she's a woman of a certain kind of class. She sees the hooks, the fish lines of where she's been drawn up from the riverbed.
Two of her fingernails are broken off, and there's dirt or grit under them. It looks like she's tried to claw her way through something.
Ray, get pictures of her teeth. We'll fax them for missing persons.
Right.
So rather than recoiling from death, even though it upsets her, she goes further into it to find out what she needs to know. And from then on, she's completely changed and totally obsessed with finding the killer that's killed this woman.
She's got something in her throat.
When a body comes out of the water, lots of times there's like leaves and things in the mouth.
We made a bunch of chocolate pupas so that, as they dissolved in there, they wouldn't taste unpleasantly. And here it comes. So there's a sound effect in here where you can hear this kind of would have been a lot of gas building up inside a body plugged up like that, and presumably when you remove the cork, the pupa, there would be a release of air. And I also liked the kind of I guess slightly morbid but nevertheless poetry of this sigh coming out of the corpse now that it's been relieved of the obstruction.
She'll be easier to print when we turn her over. Lamar, will you give me a hand with this?
Yes, I will.
Oh, Jack.
Oh, poor thing. I mean, that was really down her throat, and it was really hard. She's a wonderful, nice actress with a certain weight to her, and it's really hard to not breathe for 3-minute takes. And every time she'd breathe, of course, parts of her body would move, and we couldn't have that.
When I told that sheriff we shouldn't talk in front of a woman, that really burned you, didn't it?
This piece of information, Clarice tells Scott Glenn's character Crawford that he needn't have made those sexist remarks in the funeral parlor, and he says, point taken. He doesn't apologize. All he says is it's painful, it's not right, it's not just. But ultimately, you're serving the FBI, you're not serving yourself. Demme really fought to keep it in because it's a piece of information that you really don't ever need to know, and if you cut it out, you'd never miss it. And I'm glad that he kept that in.
Shortly after becoming involved in the project, I called Thomas Harris. I was hoping that he would be willing to come in and take a look at it and give me the advantage of his toughest criticism of the film, because I felt that, again, I was tremendously important to make this as purely, essentially Tom Harris's work as possible on screen. And at that point, Tom told me that I shouldn't have my feelings hurt if not only he didn't come in to look at cuts of the movie, but if he didn't see the movie, perhaps for a very, very long time. And he explained that he was concerned about having characters stolen from him creatively by the actors who might wind up portraying the characters. And he uses a reference point how John le Carré, after seeing Alec Guinness and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, could no longer write the character of Smiley because now Smiley belonged to Alec Guinness.
Maybe. Boy, he's a big sucker.
That's Paul Lazar, the one who flirts with Clarice, and Dan Butler as the other guy.
What do you do when you're not detecting Agent Starling?
Try to be a student, Dr. Pilcher.
This is the closest thing our movie has to a normal human encounter. It's one of the very few scenes that isn't rife with some form or another of tremendous anxiety or terror or what have you.
People said, why doesn't Clarice have a boyfriend? As if every woman on screen has to have a boyfriend or somehow they're not complete. The truth is we don't know whether Clarice has a boyfriend or not, and frankly, I don't care. There are women dying. And there's a guy out there who's trying to kill them. And you would never ask that same question of a man in a war film.
Somebody loved him.
Gosh, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to portray James Gumb in an effort to make manifest the masculine side that he's trying to escape from by turning himself into a woman. We put on the set a lot of Polaroids of James Gumb posing with topless strippers. Unfortunately, they read too small in the frame, and I never did inserts, which I sort of wish I had done. As the camera moves by him there, I wonder sometimes if audiences notice that he's naked in a movie about skin. I thought that was a good idea. Someone or other, and I don't know if this was in the book or in the script or somebody's idea, that song by the French nun, dun, 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 should be what James Gumb was listening to. And we had that on the temp track for a long time, but at a certain point it seemed a little too quirky.
Castle with sports. And I'm Tim Langhorn. Our top story for this morning. Catherine Martin, the 25-year-old daughter of Senator Ruth Martin, listed first as a missing person, is now believed to have been kidnapped by the serial killer known only as Buffalo Bill.
Screenwriter Ted Talley.
I knew the author of the novel, Thomas Harris, slightly. He was a client of my wife's at an art gallery where she worked in Manhattan. So I knew Tom socially. I knew that Tom had spent 5 years writing this novel and had done very extensive research, including at Behavioral Science Unit, the FBI. He's friendly with a lot of the people in Quantico. My wife said, well, find out if somebody's already assigned to the screenplay. And I followed up through my agent, and it turned out that there was no screenwriter yet. So I sort of applied for the job and eventually got it.
Now to the person who's holding my daughter. Catherine is very gentle and kind. Talk to her and you'll see.
Orion Pictures had optioned the book for Gene Hackman, who wanted to direct it. And he also thought that he might want to act in it, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to play Lecter or possibly pull back a bit and play the FBI guy, Crawford. And I think he just, I don't know whether it was that he didn't want to direct at all or he just got alarmed by this material. But at any rate, he dropped out without ever seeing the screenplay. I think he was worried that it was too dark a picture. He had just done a couple of movies like Mississippi Burning. And then I got a call from Mike Medavoy, which astonished me because I couldn't imagine the idea of the head of a studio calling a screenwriter directly. And I went ahead and finished the screenplay, and I got another call from him. And he said, I'm thinking of giving this project to Jonathan Demme. What do you think? And he said to me, I think this picture needs him, and I think he needs it.
I told you this is just a routine follow-up on the Raspail
He
case.
is my patient. I have rights.
I understand that, sir.
Look, I am not just some turnkey, Miss Starling.
I don't know, quite honestly, how I came up with the creation of Hannibal Lecter. They started down in Washington, and meanwhile I was up in Utah doing this movie with Michael Cimino, The Desperate Hours. The 2nd of December, 1989, I was down in Provo. We'd finished the film, finished midday, dead on 1 o'clock. I packed my bags and took off and decided to go south. I had no idea which way I was going. I just wanted this long journey.
Best of all, though, 1 week of the year, you get to leave the hospital and go here. Plum Island. Every day of that week, you may walk on the beach, you may swim in the ocean.
In each motel or hotel where I was staying on my journey, I was thinking about Lecter. I was learning the part, going through it, sifting through it, thinking about it, getting images of the guy, images of the film, and then go to bed, sleep, and the next morning I'd wake up, and then maybe the following, maybe 2 days later I'd have a look at the script again, and suddenly some new ideas, not even ideas, but some texture, some feeling about the character would become more profound, more, what's the word, potent or more palpable.
Plum Island Animal Disease Research Center. Sounds charming.
I was just so glad to be back in America and driving this vast continent that it is. And it fills me up in some way. I get a great pleasure and I get a great fulfillment from it. And by the time I reached Pittsburgh, Hannibal Lecter was ready to start work, I guess.
Not about this case, though. About yourself. Quid pro quo. Yes or no?
I remember when we were doing, I think it was the 3rd interrogation scene in that very cell, came up with the idea, he said, I think we ought to do something slightly different. I said, maybe you should be sitting somewhere on a bed and not facing her at all. That's what Jonathan is good at, and I think that's what directors are. The really best directors are the ones who know how to tap into an actor's resources.
One night he surprised 2 burglars coming out of the back of a drugstore. They shot him.
At that point, when you ask her about her father, he said, look away from her. She said, can you do that? I said, yeah. She said, just look back into the cell, but not at her. And it had the most odd effect on me and in the film, I think, because when he asks about her father, he looks away as if her pain is too much for him. And his own pain, his own past, his own monstrous past of his own abuse, because he's been an abused person.
Quid pro quo, Doctor.
That's a very complicated psychological profile for a character, which is really difficult to relate, I think, in a 2-hour movie in which he virtually is only in a quarter of the film, not even a quarter of the film.
What else?
She had an object deliberately inserted into her throat. Now, that hasn't been made public yet. We don't know what it means.
Was it a butterfly?
Yes, a moth.
I think the wonderful thing about the Clarice-Lecter relationship is that once she accepts him as human, she also tells him that there are boundaries and that those boundaries are to be respected in some ways. He sees himself as her mentor, and she allows him to see himself as her mentor because that's how she's going to get what she wants, which is the information in order to track down Buffalo Bill. And the truth is that it's a quite beautiful, quite intimate, respectful relationship.
So close to the way you're going to catch him. Do you realize that?
No, tell me why.
After your father's murder, you were orphaned. What happened next?
I had an image of him sitting in an oak-paneled office in an old building in Baltimore, in his psychiatric office, in black suit, white shirt, dark red tie, sleek back hair, and very charming, and listening to his patients. That's one of the images, and of sunlight coming into the room on a beautiful morning, the smell of coffee. This elegant man sitting behind a desk, studying his patients. That's the only flashing image I had. This man who's capable of such horror. It's a theatrical performance, I guess. There's nothing naturalistic about it.
Billy is not a real transsexual, but he thinks he is. He tries to be. He's tried to be a lot of things, I expect.
In all our movies, Tack and I always try to never have a close-up that's the same as a close-up, either compositionally or size-wise, in any other sequence in the movie. I mean, you can see so many pictures where there's a certain close-up size, where now that's time for the close-ups, and there it is. It's framed exactly the same way, and the head's the same size in it. Even as in life, every encounter feels differently, and is perceived visually differently, inevitably. Should be the same way in movies, we think.
Systematic abuse. Billy hates his own identity, you see, and he thinks that makes him a transsexual. But his pathology is 1,000 times more savage and more terrifying.
It rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's told.
Oh, God, here's another scene that I just think is so horrendous. That was, of all the scenes to film, the scene of Catherine in the bottom of the pit begging this guy for permission to go home was the hardest one to do.
Okay.
I really had to lean on Brooke, who's a fine young actress. I really felt I had to lean on her a lot to make sure that she honored dramatically the horrible reality of people who have been thusly confined. Also, you got to show just how horrible it is, or you're doing a disservice to the families. And I told her she needed to be prepared to do kind of anything to get out of that pit, even as someone in a pit like that would feel compelled to try anything. And I wasn't sure what form it would take, but I thought, you might have to offer yourself sexually in the most graphic terms to him. We've heard from the literature about this reduction to the infantile state and how grown-ups who are confined at a certain point become the child who is trapped in a room and wants to get home to their mommy in time for dinner. And I wanted to push that and make sure that we were being truthful with it. In Thomas Harris's book, and here in the movie we tried to get it, there's this idea of James Gumb being so fascinated by a real woman. Even under this moment of stress for him, he's still fantasizing about being that woman.
You still think you're gonna walk on some beach and see the birdies? No, I don't think so. I called Senator Ruth Martin. She never heard of any deal with you.
I go for the physical mask of the part, because once you've got that mask on, you're free. You're free to do anything you want. And when I say mask, I mean it's a symbolic mask. It could be a pair of shoes you're wearing in the character. It could be a jacket. It could be, for example, in the case of Hannibal Lecter, the sleek back hair and the pale face. And the stillness, that's the mask.
Identify Buffalo Bill by name.
I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think back into the character. The character's there. And I don't know how that works, and I don't analyze it anymore. It just works for me. It's the rocket fuel that delivers me into the other character. I'm not involved in it to the degree that I have to eat and sleep and dream it all the time. Though I must say with Hannibal Lecter, he did become a slight obsession. I mean, I did think about it a lot.
And I have a few conditions of my own.
Clean him up and get him ready to go.
There's always the awareness that this is a big, important scene that has to deliver. I've got a fixation about casting Roger Corman as the head of things.
Yeah, I rolled the dice. I had to.
Roger Corman as the head of the FBI.
Paul Krenler's over here from Justice.
That's Ron Water playing the guy from the Justice Department. This establishing shot is an example of every once in a while Tak Fujimoto just comes up with a way to get into a scene. In the script it probably said establishing shot, Memphis Airport.
There's the El Greco. I should got to this point. I did this outrageous thing of El Greco, the paintings of El Greco, and Demi burst out laughing. He said, "You're so outrageous, Hopkins." I wanted something which is peculiarly decadent.
Screenwriter Ted Talley.
There's a scene in the book when they first bring him to Memphis here where the two policemen are actually running a metal detector over him. And when it gets to his mouth, it sets off the metal detector. And one of them says, "Something's in his mouth, reach in there." And the other says, "You reach in there." And they decide it's probably just his fillings and they're going to leave it alone. I'm sort of pained by the camp fun that Lecter turned into. I mean, Lecter, who was this completely horrible character, became a sort of cuddly camp figure.
You can really see how fighting AIDS has taken its toll on Ron Water. He looks so unbelievably healthy here. 3 years later, in Philadelphia, you can see he's lost a lot of weight and certainly hasn't lost any of his dramatic skills, but he's aged a lot.
Lecter is a literary construct to me. I never thought of him exactly as a real person in the way that I think of Clarice as a real person. Lecter is larger than life. He's like Professor Moriarty in the Sherlock Holmes stories. On the other hand, Lecter is witty. We weren't that surprised when the audience reacted to Lecter with a strange kind of affection, even. The idea of this completely insane and even cannibalistic psychiatrist, just as a kind of literary joke, is a very witty construction. Everybody's kind of naive fears of psychiatry play into that. A movie about two serial killers, first of all, seems so ridiculously lurid and hokey, it just doesn't seem like it could possibly be made to work. I think that in terms of Hollywood, serial killers are really a tacky, overdone crutch, dramatically. I know Jonathan's first reaction when he was sent this novel was, a serial killer? Oh, forget it. No. We're interested in serial killers because they seem more diabolical and more clever and more unpredictable than other killers. Evil is fascinating in movies, But it's strange to see Tony Hopkins, an insane serial-killing cannibal, become sort of the mascot of college kids at their beer parties and, women saying he's so sexy in interviews. The last thing you ever expect to happen is for a movie to become a cultural phenomenon, to sort of pass into the zeitgeist of the country. It's tapped it in some way that it didn't know it was going to. He is unadulteratedly evil. We never wanted to pretend otherwise. But he has a fascination because you don't know what he's going to do next. He's fun to watch for that reason. And because he is witty. And Tony Hopkins is a sexy actor.
Oh, and Senator, just one more thing. Love your suit.
Jonathan Demme.
Lecter never struck me, either in the book or in the script, as being sexy because his activities are so repellent. that I just can't imagine eroticism being part of the same kit and caboodle that features cannibalism and the most gruesome kind of dismemberment. I must admit that when we were filming, and even to this very day, Tony takes a certain pleasure from suddenly baring his teeth and dive-bombing some woman or other's neck. I have noticed that the women do what my wife does, which is to kind of bare her throat the way a deer does to a wolf and say, "Go ahead, go ahead." So I guess there is a certain eroticism that escapes me in Dr. Lecter's whole thing.
And now for the hard part, apprehending the suspect. Excuse me, folks, I'm going to have to catch a flight.
The officer, Charles Napier, who I've had the good fortune to have as a cast member in every single movie I've made since 1977. I became aware of Chuck through Russ Meyer's movies, where he was kind of a softcore porn superstar. And he's a great, I think, a fantastic actor and a wonderful guy. There's Charles Napier. He's a tremendously imposing, physically guy. He suggests substantial power. And he also, I think, has a richness of character that makes it hard to imagine him being easily overwhelmed.
In the big cage scene, you know, and when they move me, they were going to have me in some orange. And I went to the head of the wardrobe department. I said, what I really would like to do is be in white. I saw that in clinical white because that makes me even more terrifying. She said, there may be a problem with lighting. I said, well, let's go and ask Jonathan. So I went to Jonathan. I said, I'd like to be in white T-shirt, white pants, and white shoes. He said, okay. I wanted him to look like the friendly doctor or one's dental surgeon that you go and visit, because there's something in a lot of people's consciousness which is quite scary about people in white. You know, the dentist or the doctor, they have power over you.
No, I came because I wanted to.
It smacks of such arrogance, people swiveling around in chairs. I remember meeting a director and I wanted to punch him out because he just swiveled around in those chairs. He was interviewing me many years ago. Then would swivel away and look out of the window. Next time he swiveled back, I was out of the door, I'd gone. Yeah. So I thought this would be a good idea.
That was good. Pity about poor Catherine, though. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock.
Your anagrams are showing, Doctor.
The scenes between Lecter and Clarice are basically seduction scenes. They play, oddly enough, as if they were lovers. They only touch one time in the entire movie, in their last scene together when he says goodbye to her, and as he hands her back her notes, he touches her finger. And it's almost a shock to the audience when they actually touch. But these scenes, I think you approach exactly as if you were writing a sort of courtship between two lovers.
Nothing was hard to accomplish in these scenes because the actors were so great. The location is phenomenal. This is a huge room inside the Sailors and Soldiers Museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Just the trappings and the look of the place is incredible. We didn't have to do a whole lot to change anything in there. This ludicrous imagery of a giant bird cage stuck in the middle of a room. In reality, would ever anyone have a confinement situation like this? Doubtful. And yet, when you see it in the movie, it's sort of, well, there it is. And I guess it's because we know Dr. Lecter so well, we understand that were there a Dr. Lecter who did have to be moved, this is what you would have to have. Now we do have the bars for the first time, but look how wide they are. We're not taking any chances about getting eyes obscured this time around.
And one of the things that I love about the Clarice character is that when you finally get to what the mystery that Clarice has is, Lecter finally says, you know, I need to know what it is about you. You know, tell me the story, tell me the story. You think it's going to be some immense, intense, horrible, victimizing crescendo. It's going to be something terrible that happened to her that shaped her life forever. And what it is a very, very small event that instead of shaping her life, just told her who she already was.
But we don't reckon time the same way, do we, Clarice? This is all the time you'll ever have.
Later. Now, please listen to me. We've only got 5...
No. I will listen now.
The idea being is that the hero was the hero before he was born, and it's just a question of fate. that there will be instances in their life that will challenge their heroism and that will show itself to them, but that even when you're 8 or 9 years old, you have a nature and you have a character, and you follow that character.
What set you off? You started at what time?
Early, still dark.
Then something woke you, didn't it? Was it a dream? What was it?
Tack was very concerned about when Jodie told her story, as she's transported back to the past, losing all visual references for where she actually is. And as the camera pushes in on her, it goes so tight you can't see much anymore anyway. But in addition to that, he dropped out all the fill lighting in the room, and that was one of those things where Tack would come over to me every 10 minutes or so and go, do you think we should drop out all the light and go surreal, or keep it the way it is and just trust the push-in? And I go, gosh, I'm not sure, Tack. And he'd go, okay. And he'd walk away, and he probably asked me that 2 or 3 times. Then finally he just did it. He just went ahead and did it.
They were screaming.
They were slaughtering the spring lambs?
They were screaming.
There was one other extended dream sequence that we worked on a lot when we were working over the script. Jonathan had a very clear vision of it in his mind. It got to the point almost that he was dictating that scene to me, because I didn't understand what he had in mind for crane shots and helicopter shots and all that kind of stuff. At the climax of Clarice's relationship with Lecter, when she tells the story of the night when she was a child and she saw the spring lambs being killed on the farm, Jonathan wanted initially to see a visual of that entire sequence. So I had to structure an entire scenario of a sort of movie within a movie, where you see a little girl in a dark room with creepy shadows, and it's somewhere, and there's a Western motif, and you see her wake up and go to the window and look down, and you see a strange light coming out of the barn, and then you see her creep downstairs. There was this long, long sequence, and the climax of which was a kind of surrealistic moment where the lambs are being slaughtered by a cowboy, a guy in a hat or whatever in the barn, and he turns and looks at her, and it's Lecter. So that it's both a real memory and a kind of surrealistic crossover.
It's easy while watching Jodie convey this story, it's easy to understand that the greatest shots in the world visualizing what she's talking about couldn't begin to match the power of her telling of it. How could you cut away from that face and go to a shot of a young actress in a big barn somewhere? It'd be preposterous.
I don't know.
Thank you, Clarice.
Tell me his name, Doctor.
These are 2 extraordinarily gifted thinkers engaged in a tremendously important conversation. At last, a mind came into his field that was worthy of verbal and mental intercourse. I don't know that sexual intercourse has any place in any of this. I mean, yes, he's a man, and yes, she's a woman. He's very handsome, and she's very beautiful, but so what? These are minds at work here. There's an eroticism in the thought process that transcends any kind of physical eroticism that might be possible between the 2. See this guy leading them out? It's George Romero, the most gifted maker of terrifying movies in the world today. There's George with his walkie-talkie. Understood that in the movie, a strange thing is happening here. We are losing our heroine for a prolonged period of time. We're suddenly in the hands of our heroine's nemesis. You realize that that return to Washington and defeat is an important thing to show. It's an important thing for her. She's hit rock bottom. It also gives us a taste of her. That wasn't in the book. There was not a moment at the airport.
There's something mechanistic about evil, something mundane, and somebody described being inside the Third Reich, inside Adolf Hitler's Germany, as something so cheap, so mundane, so prosaic, so camp, that it was like being in a piece of machinery. That Hitler was an empty piece of machinery, like the ghost in the machine. Albert Speer describes him as that, and Albert Speer was his close associate. Described Hitler as a totally empty man, inert and dead. But as soon as he got onto that podium to speak, he roused 80 million people to the most horrifying nightmare of the 20th century. There's something soulless about this kind of person. Except I think with Lecter there is something in there that's taking away, some atom of compassion, some atom of human affection and human love. And that's the thing about him, is that it's like Iago in Othello or Richard III. You get a sense that if you could only get through to these monsters, that's what makes them fascinating, is that there is a core inside, and people will think, if I could only get into that core, I'd make him a better person. And I think that's the erotic power.
An even stranger thing's going to happen in this movie before too long, that once Dr. Lecter overpowers the guards, we're not even going to have anyone we know.
Hand me that, would you?
We've established that Lecter can get out and the cell door is open. We now just kind of stick with the reality. And I love panning up to Chuck Napier's face there and the little glimpse of the sketches of Clarice that Dr. Lecter was doing. Is he going to get him now? No. So he goes back and kind of tidies everything up. And I don't know about everybody else, but I'm going, oh my God, what's he going to do? A little glimpse of the Bon Appetit magazine that everybody laughs at, even though they're hopefully quite terrified. After all that passivity, Dr. Lecter is in action. We had a nice piece of rubber for Tony Hopkins to be biting on one end and for the other actor to be biting on so they could like shake their heads as though he had his cheek in his mouth. We do have a weird animal sound in there. This was so much easier to shoot than the girl trapped in the pit. Ultimately, this is all kind of just movie stuff, you know, men doing what they do best, damaging each other's bodies mercilessly and killing each other. Images of innocent people confined against their will with the threat of horrible things happening to them, pleading for release is just, to me, just devastating.
Hannibal Lecter, he probably plays the piano brilliantly and the violin brilliantly. That's a kind of an old-fashioned formula, isn't it? I mean, I remember seeing Day of the Jackal, Zinnemann film, and Cyril Cusack, who's the marksman expert, the man who makes guns. It's the old film formula. He's always pouring tea into beautiful porcelain or china cups. Would you like a nice cup of tea? It's the Beauty and the Beast formula again, you know.
We did one take of when Dr. Lecter's walking away here. And Anthony Hopkins, there's a shot that is not in the movie of him actually walking away where he's sort of approaching the other officer and saying, okay, ready when you are.
Ready when you are, Sergeant Pembry.
On one take, Tony did it as Sylvester Stallone doing Rocky, but it was really great. We're now going to be stuck with a bunch of cops for a good 5 or 7 or 10 minutes or so while they try to find Dr. Lecter. So the casting of the group of police officers became tremendously important because the whole movie is riding on a bunch of supporting actors' backs for a significant passage of the picture. There's Danny Darst, a very gifted country western singer-songwriter who's a great, great guy, as the leader of this group. Brett's one of Tim Robbins' acting company, and Cynthia is also from the Actors Gang, a great, great acting company out in California that we had seen. Every small part or supporting part always has to be cast with tremendous care, always. So in a way, this is no different from the other, but there is one difference, which is they're just all alone. They haven't got any of the leads to help power through. Every casting choice here was as big in its own way as the casting of the leads. Generally, as far as the FBI was concerned, we had made the Top Gun of the FBI, which of course I had slightly mixed feelings about, because I have slightly mixed feelings about the FBI.
FBI agent John Douglas.
While one hand, there's an admiration of how they're able to dupe the police and dupe us, but there's a line. I draw a line. And right after that interview, I can go off next door and give them a shot of whatever to execute them, or pull a switch. But before I ever pull a switch, and I've been asked to witness executions, and I will go, I want to look at the crime scene photographs. I want to, because to understand the serial killer, you must understand the victims. And when you're analyzing a crime scene, you must do a victimology, a profile of the victim first. So when I'm looking at a pattern of wounds, I'm trying to learn what this victim was probably experiencing, what she probably heard from this killer, what she probably saw from this killer, what his face looked like when he was talking to her and torturing her, what she experienced at the time of death. So to witness an execution, I want to pull out those materials prior to going into the penitentiary to witness an execution, because I don't want to lose sight that the victims come first. And this guy, the killer, it may be unfortunate that the killer was the product of some type of abuse and had a bad life, but they cannot be really rehabilitated. What they have done cannot be accepted. I'm all for capital punishment. You just can't believe that there are people out there that just want to hurt other people. It's not just the sex, it's just not to rape, it's to destroy their fellow man. And there's no feeling.
Chris Isaak, in his second screen appearance, his first being as the demented clown hitman in Married to the Mob, as my old high school buddy Buzz Killman pulling a stretcher out. He's a disc jockey and radio personality and harmonica player from Chicago who adores movies so much it's a big thrill to put him in them all the time. Silence of the Lambs was the first movie I ever committed to directing before I read the script. I mean, you just don't do that. But the book was so great, and I was familiar with Ted Talley's work, both as a playwright and a screenwriter. I knew he was going to nail it and just agreed to do it. And when Ted finally finished his script and gave it to us, Ted's first draft is, 85% what we see in the finished movie.
Top 3 floors secured, main stairwell secured.
Anthony Hopkins.
When the film was released, when it opened in America, I had a feeling it was going to be a very successful film. There was a lot of hype and publicity about it. I suppose as an actor, I'd always wanted to be in a big American movie, a big successful American movie. Every actor would like to do that, I'm sure. And I remember sitting on Sunset Boulevard one afternoon, just down the strip there, and the big billboards were just being put up. And I sat in the car and I saw Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, Scott Glenn, Silence of the Lambs. And I sat there and I thought, well, I've done it. Now what? And it sort of let me off the hook. It let me off the hook. I thought, well, I've done it. Now I can relax and hopefully carry on working for a good many more years, I hope. But not worry about it, what more is there? I've done exactly what I wanted to do. I've achieved everything I wanted to do.
Screenwriter Ted Talley.
You're constantly dealing with trapped environments. You've got Lecter's cell, and she's trapped there almost as much as he is because she's got to talk to him there. And you've got this other cell in Memphis that they build for him, and you've got Gum's basement. It's very, very claustrophobic. It sort of pulls in on you and traps you in it.
No movement. Johnny, hold your fire. We're coming into the car. We're opening the hatch.
I feel that like I'm an observer of my own life. I don't feel a part of it in a way, which is a very odd experience most of the time because I feel that I'm not actually here. I'm observing it all going on around me. And in a way, it's a very nice feeling because I'm free. I don't get caught up in the tension of competition or think that it's important. It's not important. None of it is important. It's just I happen to be an actor. I don't even know why I do it. I don't know what the process of acting is anymore. I show up and I do it, and generally people seem to like what I do. It's odd. I can't really put my finger on it. It's as if I'm detached from it. I say to myself, my life really is none of my business. The more I get out of the way and let it happen, the better it is. So I don't expect things.
pulsating 4. We got him on lactated ringers running, and the patient is on 10 liters of oxygen.
Now, the only way we in law enforcement are going to catch up with these guys, unfortunately, is that their ego is enhanced. They grow in confidence. And so we wait for them to slip up.
By now, he could be anywhere.
He won't come after me.
Oh, really?
He won't.
When you look back historically at these cases, oftentimes it wasn't because of good police work, it was because the killer made a mistake. One of the things that always amazed me was that people in the mental health profession and the correctional associations would determine whether or not someone is guilty or innocent, psychotic, or was sane when they committed a crime, having never looked at the crime scene photographs. If they would look at the crime scene photographs of the victims, say, of a serial killer, that would prejudice them. It was just always amazing to me, because to understand the criminal personality and to understand the serial murderer, you must look at their handiwork. If you don't do that, you really don't know who you're talking to.
Is this Lecter's handwriting? Clarice, doesn't this random scattering of sight seem desperately random?
Modus operandi is learned behavior. As the subject gets older, he perfects the modus operandi. But what you look for is the signature. What is the thing that's linking these cases together? In The Silence of the Lambs, we saw the killer was removing skin from his victims. For what purpose, we didn't know until near the end of the movie. But that was the signature when these bodies were showing up around the country that linked these cases together.
Why?
Well, she didn't drift. He weighted her down.
What did Lecter say about the first principles?
Simplicity.
So I take what I learn from a serial killer and I apply it to an ongoing investigation. And I'm thinking like they're thinking. And I begin to visualize them. And I'm beginning to see why they picked a certain victim and why they did the things that they did. Jonathan Demme came down throughout the filming of Silence of the Lambs, and I helped review the screenplay and wrote in margins, gave him ideas as to characters, how to best portray the characters. I said, Jonathan, I said, to me, a serial killer is on the hunt. It would almost be something in that movie, that riveting movie, like almost like a Jaws, kind of that boom, 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 where I would hear like the heartbeat. Because if you would put a stethoscope on the heart of a serial killer, at the time he's out there on the hunt, you'd have a normal beat. Then when he sees his victim, the heartbeat would increase. The heartbeat would pick up the pace. Just like a lion chasing a water buffalo. It picks up the beat, goes on the hunt, gets the victim. Once the victim is under control, the heartbeat drops back to normal, and life goes on.
Jodie Foster.
It's almost unheard of in cinema history to have a woman who is a hero saving other women. Some of the critiques about the movie, I mean, I use critique as really just a sort of a journalistic investigation, say, of the film, have said, well, it's just another movie where women are victimized by a cruel man. The truth is that you look through the history books and you look through the crime reports, and that happens to be an enormous statistical truth. And it's terrible but true. So why not make a movie that sheds light on it and uses a female hero to save those women, rather than say, oh, well, women don't get victimized by men. They don't get picked up randomly. They aren't victims of rape very often. I mean, why not tell what the truth is, which is they fall prey to most of the violent crimes in this country.
When she looks out the window there, she sees the river. We tried to have a lot of water throughout the picture, visualize different bodies of water. One reason is that the floaters keep popping up like that. But this idea that water is in some way in movies disturbing. This is on such intense personal terrain. Here's she who wants to save victims in the home of a previous victim, surrounded by her stuff, in her effort to save the victim who might be saved. And she doesn't know what she's looking for. And she's not even entirely sure why she came. All she knows is she wants to get close to the source and wants to try to empathize with a victim and hopes to find a clue somehow. And she wanders around and stuff. For those of us who believe that women are equipped with a certain sixth sense, some kind of sensitivity, almost an ESP thing that males just don't get, this scene is very eloquent. It speaks to that in a very direct kind of way. The photographs of this victim, Frederica, posing semi-dressed, of course, there's the skin thing, and the idea that James Gumb might have taken in his obsession with skin before he actually killed her and skinned her. He built up to it by photographing her skin. But that doesn't exist in the book. But in the book, there's a scene where Clarice finds naughty Polaroids of Catherine Martin in Catherine's house and gets in trouble for that discovery. She's reprimanded for having gone there in the first place. It makes the senator angry. So we kind of borrowed this idea of Polaroids and imposed it on this sequence to give her something, a little tiny discovery before making her big discovery.
And you see a situation developing, which I think is still in the movie, where Clarice Starling is like a woman with three fathers. She has the evil father, Lecter. She has the kindly father, Crawford. And she has her own dead father that she's still in mourning for. And it's as if she has to get beyond all three of these fathers to become a grown-up in her own right. You can feel that working out in the book, and I think a little bit in the movie.
He's making himself a woman's suit, Mr. Crawford, out of real women. And he can sew, this guy.
Jonathan sort of felt his way into it gingerly. We did a total of 4 drafts. Most of the changes were in the first 2 drafts. He was never directly concerned about sheer length. He said, I'll never cut just for length. He was concerned with the flow of the narrative. He felt that we had to lose 2 or 3 subplots that I had tried to retain from the book. Jonathan also wanted to keep experimenting with the rhythm of the intercutting plots between the Lecter plot and the James Gumb plot. He was very concerned with that rhythm, so we played with that a lot in the rewrites. Jonathan always felt that the audience understands more than we give them credit for, and Jonathan said it's better to risk confusing the audience for a couple minutes than to let them get ahead of us.
Yes, sir, you bet. I'll do my best.
Starling, we wouldn't have found him without you. Nobody's going to forget that. At least of all me.
Tom Harris broke a lot of rules of this genre when he wrote this book. And you've got a female character who never takes her clothes off or has a bed scene or has a love interest of any kind, because that's not part of her life when she's in the middle of an investigation that all happens in the course of about a week. And yet it works anyway, because he's such a good writer.
Thanks for the scraps, asshole. When I got a better idea.
The particular horror of serial killers, of course, is that their victims have no way of seeing them coming, because it's just whatever bizarre criteria they're using to pick out their victims is not usually something that you can guess. The idea of being murdered by a stranger for no particular reason, or for some twisted reason that really makes no sense, is unfortunately a growing phenomenon in this country.
Ted Levine just impressed me the most, finally. Ted is the kind of actor who will scare you a little bit on the audition because he thinks that will help you believe that he can scare the audience when he acts the part out. The blood drops, it's kind of teardrops from an incision. Very James Gumb.
Come on, precious. I got a yummy, yummy snack for you. Come on, come and get it.
Ouch. So many people just find that so difficult to watch. That's not a real nipple anyway, it's a prosthetic. Don't they realize that? So many people think the nipple ring is one of the most excruciating moments in the movie. I don't get that.
Precious.
I also sensed a really vivid imagination in Ted, a complete absence of inhibitions. Most importantly, a real sense that this is the kind of actor who takes full responsibility for their character, which is what I sort of demand of an actor. I'm not the kind of director who can help you figure out why your character does anything or where he came from or what have you.
Take that bone. Come on.
I know that in the book there's a scene when James Gumb gets out of the shower or the bathtub and for a moment tucks his genitals between his legs so he can look at himself in the mirror as a woman. And of course, since that's at the heart of his character, I felt that we'd have to have it in the movie.
No.
Somehow or other, this idea of a video, I think that's my idea, that we could have that image. I didn't know how to get in or out of a bathtub scene and just kind of have that. I thought it might feel a little fragmentary. But if he was kind of dressing himself up as a female rock star and revealing himself as a naked woman at the end of it, I thought that would have more of a set piece kind of feeling to it. I love this scene a lot. That's Lauren Roselli, who is actually a member of a pop group called Book of Love, and who's a family friend who I think has tremendous presence and sort of wonderful, accessible humanity. In rehearsals, Jody suggested that it might be nice imagery if Lauren's character was kind of leaning on her elbow on the counter as the scene opens up. I love the idea of her playing this sweet, vulnerable friend of Frederica.
Jamie Gumb or a James Gumb. How about John Grant? No.
And see, once again, when she's sitting there talking to the young woman from the bank, she's not getting any resistance. You know, thank God she encountered a woman who, doesn't have all the kind of nonsense that makes women's lives a little more difficult.
Can you give me Mrs. Lippman's address? I need to talk to her.
We had a moth wrangler, moths at various stages of life cycle ready to spring into action. That removal of that proboscis sheath, I think, is a kind of an extraordinary thing to see in a movie.
So powerful, so beautiful.
We had a couple of mechanicals, but mainly ones that were just sort of in suspended animation, waiting to be heated up enough to be unleashed.
Down here, you sack of shit!
Ted Talley makes a little cameo appearance as a member of the SWAT team here.
That's my close-up. Thank you, Jonathan.
Nice job, Ted.
Darling, how are you all right?
She's in a lot of pain, mister. She needs a vet.
One of our biggest concerns with this scene where the SWAT team is supposedly surrounding the place where James Gumb is hiding was the fact that we picked this tiny little innocent-looking, innocuous house, and yet when we cut downstairs we have seen this vast, gigantic, sprawling basement that in fact is from another house. That pays off, of course, when Clarice knocks at the door and James Gumb answers in a great big old sprawling house that in fact fits it. The toughest thing to capture the thrilling experience of reading the book was when Clarice suddenly is on the doorstep of James Gumb. The book does it in its own unique, incredible way. And we do a kind of a cinematic version of that, but we approach it a different way. Because when you read the book, that you are so shocked, it's impossible that Clarice is standing there opposite James Gumb. You've got to kind of like almost flip through the chapters again, is because he's elsewhere and she's here, and the same thing had to be the case in the movie. I'm very pleased with the way that worked out. I think it's really incredible editing, incredible scene design on the part of, many people.
That was our one stunt in the entire movie, the stuntman jumping in through the shattering window. Who ever heard of a thriller that doesn't even have cars crashing and stunts?
What's the problem, officer?
There's something wonderful about this section because Clarice has been charting down the path of Jamie Gumb and his relationship to the first woman who was killed. And she sort of stumbles on this house and knocks, and she's tired and doesn't think that it's anything. And he says something kind of off color. He says, she was a big woman, wasn't she?
Oh, wait. Was she a great big fat person?
Yeah, she was a big girl, sir. Clarice kind of takes a tiny offense at that, and it sets her off enough to sort of insist on going inside. And the second that she crosses the threshold, without seeing the butterfly, without seeing anything, there's this eerie connection.
I love this panning shot where we connect the water once again with this innocent-looking, nice old house somewhere. That's a shot that Christy Zia, one of many that Christy Zia directed and conceived of in her capacity as second unit director, and it dropped in just real beautiful. This scene where they're finally in the same room together, I love, because here's where we've worked very hard to create the idea that Clarice has kind of a sixth sense, almost an ESP about things, and that it's her estrogen is guiding her towards a solution to this crime, and the camera takes on a mind of its own here, kind of exploring the place with her, sometimes exploring the place without her, like when the camera pans off of her for no apparent reason onto a close-up of a painting of a butterfly, a painting executed, by the way, by my wife, Joanne Howard.
The police around here don't seem to have the first clue.
I love that idea of, even though you know it's a movie, you're still literally kind of terrified. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a great example for me. You know you're sitting there in a movie theater watching a movie, and yet the events you're seeing are so harrowing. You want the heroine to escape so badly that you're going, get out of there!
It's a really interesting detail, I think, that really works in with the rest of the piece. He starts looking through some cards, and the second he looks at her, he just can't help but start to laugh, because she's yet another it. He can't help but laugh at women, because women are nothing. They're powerless, and he's about to get her for her hair. And she pulls the gun on him, and he just keeps laughing because he thinks he's invincible. He just can't possibly imagine that an it would ever kill him, because its are like bugs that you squash.
Spread your legs. Put your hands in the back. Thumbs up. Freeze!
One of the great line readings for me in movies, certainly my own movies, Clarice finally pulls her gun out and tells him to freeze in a tremendously emotional way. One of the questions I had for myself was, well, how come Clarice doesn't call for backup now and go out and wait in the safety of her car until the rest of her support team can arrive? And that's a question which might fairly be asked by people who see the movie, but I finally came to believe, as Jodie did for Clarice's sake, that she has worked so hard to find this guy in an effort to save the life of someone who may still be alive, but who may, within moments, not be alive. Given a choice to go to the phone and call for backup, or pursuing this guy, trying to find the young woman, she makes the choice, incorrectly in terms of FBI procedure, but perhaps correctly in terms of humanistic impulses, to go for the victim.
Jonathan said one time that Roger Corman told him the most terrifying shot in all of cinema is the camera approaching a closed door. That's something Jonathan learned from Roger Corman.
Here's Roger Corman's favorite shot again. POV camera moving down a hallway, panning to a door. Roger always said that's the scariest shot you'll ever see in movies. And then, of course, you see The Exorcist, and there it is. Every time we go back upstairs to see Linda Blair, first we must dolly down the hallway to the closed door. Terrifying. The skin suit. Always wonder if people notice that there's a half-made suit of human skin sitting there.
I think the fear is really important to see in her eyes, because I'm sorry, I don't believe that cops or detectives or FBI people face death and don't have a certain amount of fear. I was really tired of seeing heroes like that have that kind of steely gaze, and I just didn't believe in it. I think that you go towards your fears. It doesn't mean that you're not scared, it just means that you move towards them.
You're safe!
It's also always funny to me when she bursts in and tells Catherine, FBI, you're safe. And a huge laugh comes up in the audience because, of course, on a certain level, theoretically, Clarice is right. The FBI is there. She's safe. But on the other hand, James Gumb is still down there somewhere. And Clarice is as scared as any rational human being would be under the circumstances. So perhaps she's not safe. I love Tom Harris's conceit that Catherine is not an appreciative rescuee, that instead of overflowing with thankfulness, she's saying, get me the hell out of here.
No, don't you leave me here, you fucking bitch! No! Don't you leave me here! This guy's fucking crazy!
I like also to think that the sequence is infused with a memory of some of the exercises we've seen her participate in the make-believe world of saving people, and now she's got to put it together.
The other officers will be here any minute now! Wait!
There's another closed door. Can't have too many closed doors to move up to in an action sequence.
We did all of these shots. We did them all in one night. The last night of shooting for me, 22, I think it was like a 22-hour day. We have a lot of, just being so punch drunk with tiredness that you can't even imagine that there's anything on screen.
We were trying to convey here with the decor of James Gumb's world is that there's a certain theoretical relationship anyway, and perhaps practical relationship that exists between fascination with Nazism, American patriotism, and an impulse towards violence.
This sequence in the basement, I said one time to a friend of mine who was a director, Robert Benton, I said, isn't it kind of disappointing that this story finally comes down to a madman chasing a girl in the basement? We've seen that a million times. And he said, well, we want to see that. He said, you've been promising us for an hour and a half this confrontation, and if you didn't show it, we would feel extremely cheated.
Do people get that there's a shriveled old corpse there in the bathtub that we get to see for a second before the lights go out? By extension, do they realize that that is probably the old woman whose home this was, who employed James Gumb, and Frederica Bimmel, whose character James Gumb has probably adopted to a certain extent?
She does everything that they ever taught her in the training, which is the first 10 minutes of the movie, until she gets to the point where the lights go off. And it's the training that's happened through her whole life, her whole unconscious life, everything that gets passed down through generations. And I believe that the great duel between Jamie Gumb and Clarice Starling is that he thinks that he's protected because he has women's armor, and she has the real thing.
One of the things that's interesting about our extreme use of subjective camera is, and this is something the audience doesn't get, shouldn't get, I'm glad they don't get, but maybe they feel it, and maybe it's disorienting in a valuable way, that throughout the picture we are in the shoes of Clarice, our heroine. We show her point of view. We show what Clarice sees constantly. When the lights go off in the basement, and she's disempowered by her loss of sight, we suddenly shift our point of view. We suddenly put the audience in the shoes of the killer himself. And now she is objectified in a frightening way. And I kind of enjoy that for reasons I can't express, just the fun it is to play with film technique.
If you look really carefully, this is the big mistake. When the pistol goes up in front, it casts a shadow over my back. Now, of course, if there was no light, there obviously would be no shadow. Now, how could you be in the dark and have a camera rolling at the same time? If there was no light, you couldn't see anything.
She's got to take a speed loader out of her pocket. She's got to knock the chamber out of her gun, take a speed loader out, reload her gun, and do it in seconds while being terrified. She's probably underrated as a physical actress. She's an extraordinarily good physical actor.
We did this moment of James Gumb lying mortally wounded and Clarice trying to reload the gun after 22 hours of photography on our last day of shooting. The exhaustion we were all feeling fueled somehow the exhaustion that Clarice surely must feel at this moment at the end of her journey. See that nice butterfly metamorphosis? We thought that James Gumb was probably the kind of guy who frequented flea markets.
Clarice is a real female hero, not a bad imitation of a male hero. And it is a rites of passage movie. When you bring the audience through you as a character, and you survive it, and you survive it intact in a whole and real way, then at least that they know that they can survive victimhood in a whole and real way, and that it doesn't mean that they're not whole people.
That's Walt Stowe, who's one of the officials of the FBI Training Academy. There's several other actual FBI. They're the two leaders of the FBI Academy. Love that moment between the two women. I don't know why. That always chokes me up and makes me real emotional. They went through a lot together.
W. Stevens.
This is after graduation. We do have graduation day for the FBI. Here's a cake, an FBI cake, and families are invited in.
There's John Douglas's kids, his two daughters, working their way through the background of the shot there. Great kids, great family, great guy. There's Pilcher and Roden again. But I think we get a glimpse of our executive producer, Gary Getzman, playing the piano in character as Guido Peonesa, a character that he pops up as in all the movies I do. We had a special screening of the picture when it was finished for the FBI. We were so appreciative of the incredible help they extended to us in the making of the movie that we were anxious that they should see it. Here's the much discussed handshake. I've been asked many times, well, how come that moment gets such a big old close-up? And I'm not sure. It just seemed for me a terrific symbol of Crawford accepting Clarice as an equal.
Well, Clarice. I was in Utah. I was filming with Michael Cimino, and the scene was being filmed. And there's a phone call, so they wanted my voiceover. I was linked up to this set, this film set, wherever it was. I don't know where this was, from Utah. And they said, I was in touch with Jonathan. He said, okay, Jodie's going to come to the phone and says, we'll surprise her. When we call action, we'll whisper action to you. It'll be your voice.
I'm having an old friend for dinner. Bye.
In hanging the conclusion of the movie on this wonderful line that Ted Tally derived from Thomas Harris's Landscape, that's our way of trying to give that really satisfying moment to an audience instead of giving them the harder-edged satisfaction of one last scare. I didn't want to go out with a cheap thrill, but of course the world is never really a safer place from evil just because one evildoer has bitten the dust, and it's a false sense of security that we are sent home with, and it trivializes the extraordinary, awesome power and strange allure of evil in the minds of men.
Anthony Hopkins.
If somebody comes up and says, I saw Silence of the Lambs 16 times, I'll say, you're very disturbed. You need treatment. Just as a joke. I was thinking of a sequel, if it ever will be done, I don't know. I think it was something that came out of The Drive, my drive across America, of this dark limousine, Lecter driving in the night through these darkened cities of America, just prowling in a black limousine, playing Bach, the interior soul. Those of you who are watching the movie, pleasant dreams. Bye.
John Douglas.
In prisons, they're not supposed to show movies like this to killers and violent offenders, but if they were sitting around, if I had a room full of serial killers and we were looking at that movie, they would be cheering at the end of the movie, the serial killer, because the serial killer got away and they didn't get away. They got caught. And the serial killer outwitted the system. He outwitted the police, he outwitted the FBI. So he lives for another day. In the theaters that I sat, there was a lot of laughing, and he became kind of a character. But I hope people separate fiction from reality. People should realize that there isn't a Hannibal Lecter. There isn't anyone that cunning, thank God, who is that sharp, that smart.
Jodie Foster.
If you bring something into the light, if you bring an act of violence into the light, if you bring a certain reality about pornography, for example, into the light, that somehow that's celebrating it. I believe that it's shedding light on it. And when you shed light on something and you come to know something, chances are you can change it. Now, in terms of the treatment of the movie, there's one thing which I think is really, really solid about the film, which helps you deal with the fact of the kind of colorful eccentricity of this serial killer amid a very drab world, is that Clarice is the good soldier, and that it's told through her eyes. And never at any time does he ever make fun of the eye of goodness and the person that's bringing you through the story who's good. In some ways, I do think that I'm a kind of a new generation of Hollywood. And my feeling is that if you love movies, then you have to be a part of the system in order to change the system. And that's another connection that I have with Clarice Starling, is my way of being powerful and wanting to change things is by following some of the rules in order to learn which ones to break and which ones not to break, which ones work and which ones don't. I always have this saying, which is, you know, if you're a dead soldier, you're just no good for the revolution. And you have to stay alive in some ways.
Ted Tally.
I thought when I first read the book, Silence of the Lambs, I thought this is a kind of project that comes along once every 10 years, maybe. Because this is a story that will absolutely rivet and thrill an audience. It has a chance to have a sort of mass commercial appeal. And yet this book is so smart, so original for a thriller, and so unusual. It has a chance to please the critics too. And sure enough, this movie transformed my career, Jonathan's, Tony Hopkins. And Jodie had already won an Oscar, but it even shot her to a whole different level. We all owe an awful lot, is mainly my feeling.
I have only, the greatest of feelings about having made Silence of the Lambs on a myriad of levels. One is, it gave me the opportunity to work with such an awesomely gifted cast that contained Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster and Scott Glenn and Charles Napier and Tracy Walter and just everybody. I just think it's an amazing cast. It's the kind of cast where you look back and go, wow, there's sure a lot of fantastic actors working in films nowadays. I like the movie a lot. I think it's really an excellent picture, and it astonishes me that I made it, because I still see myself very much a fledgling journeyman kind of filmmaker, and I look at this and I see like, wow, I've been learning something over the last 20 years. That picture looks good. The lingering sound of birds at the end is just another example of filmmakers who don't know how to end a picture. Just hanging in there as long as we possibly can, thinking, gee, if they're running some black film through the camera, through the projector here at the end, we better give everybody something to listen to in case there's still someone sitting there. My name is Jonathan Demme. I'm the director of Silence of the Lambs. Thanks for watching the movie, y'all.